Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Good moment, friends. Good moment. It's Barnet Bain. I'm here with
Sandi Stewart.
I am indeed here with Sandi Stewart, and you are tuned into Cutting Edge Consciousness, brought to you with the support. We are very grateful to acknowledge Insight Events USA and Hierophant Publishing, makers of very, very fine books and events for the body, mind, and spirit. San, how are you today?
You really want to ask me?
No, it was rhetorical.
No.
Moving right along.
Okay, I will tell you. I'm a little flustered.
You are?
I'm a little hearing from the girls in the choir, so to speak.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it driving up here and wondering why I have this sort of non-specific anxiety going.
Yeah.
And for the last week, I've been working on a lot of new projects that have been a big expansion for me. Mm-hmm. And it's been a lot of fun, and I've been very, very excited. And I think I woke up this morning with that voice that says, "Who the hell do you think you are? You can't do this stuff. What are you doing?" And, there's that part of me that wants to keep status quo that I'm hearing from. I hit a speed bump. Hard and fast.
You're cruising along
Yeah.
in the life that fits like a glove.
Yeah.
And suddenly you want to stretch that hand a little bit, and play a little larger. Your reach exceeds your grasp, and suddenly the glove doesn't fit anymore. Yeah. And every part of you shrieks. You hit a speed bump.
Yes.
Yeah, well, don't I sound like I'm such at peace with my speed bumps?
It's not good if we hit speed bumps on the same day. So
No.
you just hold in there.
No,
okay?
if you're both hitting a speed bump, if you're both stretching at the same day, it's a messy, messy house. But the interesting thing about speed bumps is that if you, it only happens if you're playing large, if you're playing into your dreams, if you're playing into a destiny. Destiny is self-chosen, but it only, if you're Gandhi and you're opening up a betting shop, you don't hit a speed bump. But if you're running a betting shop and you're suddenly decide to lead
the masses,
lead a nation, you will hit.
That's very good.
You will hit a speed bump. I'm really, really delighted to welcome really a friend and somebody, not only a friend, but somebody who I admire greatly, a friend of both of ours, to the show today, who knows a thing or two about speed bumps. In fact, he is the author of a book that I recommend. I cannot recommend more, called Yes, Yes, Hell No. And now that I think about it, the hell no is the speed bump part, folks. That's the speed bump part. So I want to welcome Brian Whetten, who is, as I said, the author of Yes, Yes, Hell No, an executive coach, and extremely sexy dancer.
Very sexy dancer.
And the president and founder of Selling by Giving. Brian, it's really a pleasure to have you with us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. You have to say Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Cutting Edge Consciousness.
That's good. We'll pull that clip and use it somewhere. You'll hear it for the rest of your life. It'll haunt you. So, hell no. Speed bumps. We have desires, and sometimes we have the courage to stretch and reach for those desires and play into those desires. And sometimes we bite off more than we can chew, and we chew like crazy trying to swallow. And sometimes we chunk it down into little bite-sized bits, but suddenly we have moved far, far away from the life that we began. And then all of a sudden, we hear from the ghosts of the past. Oh my goodness. Oh, this is scary. Oh, what if I fail? Oh, I could be humiliated. Oh, this could be a flop. Oh, what if this happens? Oh, what if that happens? Ring any bells for you?
Yeah. You're describing my life.
Tell us more.
Well, this is just been one of the biggest ahas for myself, and also I do a lot of work coaching other transformational leaders, other people who are on this path of stepping up into consciousness and serving other people. And it was just this huge aha to realize that I had this deep, deep belief inside that if I'm really on path and meant to be doing what I'm doing and I'm moving forward and, I'm saying yes to everything I'm supposed to be saying yes to, that somehow that should be comfortable.
Yeah, you get a bypass.
I did a complete bypass.
Exactly, yeah. It's interesting that you point that out because it is a very, very popular notion that we infantilize our missions and our purpose, and that we say, if I'm a very, very good person, and another version of that is, if I am on track and doing good in the world, and I'm on track on a dream, if I am doing, as Joseph Campbell said, if I am following my bliss, then I will not hear from any of the parts of myself that that are asking to be loved into the game.
Exactly. And so just along the way, figuring out that actually the surest course indicator, like the surest way of knowing that I'm on course, is not when everything is graceful and easy and yes, 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 but actually when the voice of intuition says, yes, I'm lit up, this is on purpose, you're aligned. The voice of reason, that's the second yes, checks it out and grounds it. Mm-hmm. And then the voice of fear says, hell no, this is uncomfortable, run away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It reminds me, we have a friend and a teacher who talked about past lives one time, and he was talking about the past lives that you've had that are just resting lives. And I said, what do you mean by resting life? And he said, well, those are the lives like where you were a potato farmer in Ireland, and you were married, and you had kids, and you were happy, and you worked in the fields, and you came home at night and cooked your potatoes and put your kids to bed and sat on the porch with your husband, and the next day you did it again, and you were just happy and satisfied and rested. And he said every so often you need those lives, but those of us that put up our hand to usher in this new world, we're not here having a resting life this time. We're doing a lot of work. And sometimes I think, a resting life, that sort of sounds very, very inviting right now.
Well,
I totally hear that.
It's formidable. It's a formidable challenge. We think that we have one identity, and that identity strives to realize a dream or a purpose or a vision. And then we hear from, as Whitman said, we contain multitudes. We hear from the multitudes, all of whom have a very different expression of consciousness, and some of whom, a few of whom, are as expanded as the place that we're operating from. And they have to be nurtured along, heard from, and entertained, and engaged, and brought home. We bring ourselves home.
I think that what Brian said too is so true, because when we are functioning on our true path and up against our edge, of course, we're going to hear from the parts that aren't there yet. Like, there's a part of us that is blazing the trail for all the other parts. And so we're blazing, but those other parts, just like you said also, Barnett, we have to love them and bring them up to, they're still hanging out in the past, and we're blazing a future. So we have to bring them into the present so they can go forward with us.
Well, and I think that one of the defining characteristics of so many of the people who are doing purpose-driven work these days is the deep, deep desire to do it in integrity.
Yeah.
And to me, the word integrity and the word integration are almost synonymous. Mm-hmm. And so it's that work of integrating the different voices is that we're all herding forward, just like you're describing. Mm-hmm. And it's the work of integration that actually lets us do the work in integrity.
Beautiful.
So beautifully said. It conjures up an image for me There is a sort of a visual cliche that's been in every big action movie for the last 10 years. And I know you're going to recognize it, and our listeners will recognize it. It's when there's the big explosion, and then everything splinters into a zillion pieces, and then it goes slow motion.
Yeah.
And everything's splintered and fragmented, and then all of a sudden it stops, and it goes the other way, and it comes back together again and reassembles. And I think that's a wonderful metaphor for the process of recognizing and acknowledging the fragmented selves. We first separate ourselves out from the lesser, not less than, but from the parts that make us up. Mm-hmm. And we separate so that we can be in relationship with them and not just identified with every single one. And then we love them and we reassemble. So there's some assembly required in this life.
It's like the Big Bang over and over and over and over again, right?
I never thought of it that way, but that's so clearly true. Yeah. The Big Bang is still banging.
Yeah.
It's still banging.
Well, and then there's an essential key here. There's first that acceptance choice, awareness and acceptance, to really shift from, I shouldn't be having these conflicts, to, that means I'm on path.
Yeah.
And then the second master choice is to get support and to practice. I talk a lot about the difference between, and Barnett, you're an expert on this, the old story of leadership, the heroic archetype, of the traditional hero's journey, to the new story. Yeah. That's the authentic leadership story. Yeah. And the difference between a brute force, traditional masculine, armored up, I'm going to kill the dragons, versus an authentic servant leader is that servant leaders get help over and over and over again. We really understand that we can only give as much as we receive.
I love that.
These are the hallmarks and characteristic of the post-heroic individual.
That sounds interesting. What is the post-heroic individual?
Well, you have just defined, you've just given a very, very insightful description of the post-heroic individual. It is someone who is more oriented toward where they are going than where they have been, what they can give more than what they can get, lifts to an appreciation of the nature of receiving, that in receiving one resolves the paradox of giving and getting. There is something in between that is a being state, and it's that being state by itself that inspires and uplifts those who are exposed to it. There's a wonderful, wonderful line from Lao Tzu, which I'm going to proceed to totally mangle, that says something about the quality of a real leader is that when that leader is absent, those he has led say of the leader, he's a great guy, but we did it ourselves. And that's a post-heroic leader. It's somebody who's not egoically driven. I am being flashed. That's a one finger. That means we have 1 minute. See? After 4 years, you think I would know what that sign meant.
But we're coming back after 1 minute, Brian. You're not going anywhere.
We're going to take 1 minute and hear from the wonderful people that make this program possible. So please stay with us, and we'll be right back with Brian Whetten.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Oh, it's good to be back, isn't it? Isn't it good to be back? Thank you for not tuning away from us. For those that are just finding us, glad to have you join in. So we're here with Brian Whetten. And Brian, I have a question for you. So when we hit these speed bumps and suddenly some parts of us go, they go, hell no. As you pointed out before the break, we're really hearing from aspects of the self that have some fears, that have some anxieties, that have some concerns. So we want to find ways to develop a relationship with those parts, yeah?
Yeah. And that's the real critical shift, is once you've become aware of these issues, and I think, again, this goes back to that post-heroic leader. I love that phrase, and it's fascinating to see how Hollywood is starting to come up with some initial new archetypal stories that are being rolled out, where instead of conquering our fears, instead of overcoming the fears, instead of slaying our dragons inside, which never works, the great truth of what we resist persists.
Right.
When we try to fight our fears, they just get bigger.
Yes, they act like viruses. They go stealth, and then they come back another day.
Exactly. But it also doesn't work to just deny our fears and pretend that, let's go into bypass and just pretend that there's no problems.
Well, what are we supposed to do? Help!
This is the part where we ask for support.
Help!
Tell us, Brian.
So the great opportunity is to shift from what I call fighting, fleeing, or feeding the fears to embracing them and literally making friends with them. There's a tool I teach in the book and in our workshops of how to shift from trying to overcome your fears. There's even in the most conscious self-help movements, and I've got quite a few years with a lot of the best coaches, counselors, healers, teachers in the industry, that there was this subtle bias at the core, at least in how I held it, of trying to get rid of my self-judgments, get rid of my fears, get rid of all that negativity inside, because then I'd be there.
Yep.
As opposed to really getting that, no, every time that I do a wave of healing inside, that calls me into service in the world. As I step forward in service in my authentic servant leadership, that brings up the next level of issues. The next level of yes, yes, hell, no. So, okay, how can I then go in and make friends, literally make friends with my fears? Because one of the deep truths I believe in is that every single part of every single person is doing the best they know how to achieve a positive purpose.
Yes.
So you want to find a way, what I'm hearing is you want to find a way to entertain a relationship with the parts that have the pushback, that are pushing back, that are going, hell no, not because they're bad or wrong, but because they are ill-equipped to deal with the challenges that you are bringing them to.
Exactly. And there's this amazing truth that the voice of fear, its job is not to stop us. It sometimes feels like our fears are in our way, that they're the hurdle we have to get through. If we could just slay those dragons, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
But their purpose is not to stop us. It's not to kill us. It's not to hurt us. The job of fear is to warn us of possible dangers.
Yes, that makes so much sense. So from what you're saying, Brian, I'm really getting this awareness that this is a cycle, that it's a process, and there's actually not a finish line, that It's an ongoing process and cycle. And I'm thinking about one way that could be a way to sort of befriend the fears or get more comfortable when because it's like these fears come up and we forget that we ever had fears before, and it's like, oh my God, what's going on here? And then you get over it, or you make friends with it, or you deal with it, and then a couple of weeks later you forget. So a way to deal with it in a more friendly way might be to just, as you say, befriend it, go into it, and ask yourself for the truth. Is this really a crisis? On a 1 to 10, 10 being death, 0 being nothing, where does this really end up on that measuring cycle? And in many cases, when you ask that question, you're going to really be below a 5. And that's manageable. There are real crises, and there are things that are 10s in life. But a lot of the things that stop us from living our authentic self are real stories that really aren't true, that don't hold any water. They're just habitual. And if we can look at them and ask and see that, oh, you know what, this is a 3. That's my old story. It's easier to take a breath and then take the next step towards your true purpose.
Well, and there's another piece of this, which is actually getting to the point where you can hear the warnings from the fear.
Yeah.
And feel them. You're going to hear them, and you're going to begin to feel them in your body as you develop some somatic awareness.
And as you welcome them in, as the voice of fear escalates. If you ever have anxiety, if you have like a level 8, 9, 10 fear, it's because of a loop that's going on inside. It's not the size of the fear or the issue that's the problem, just as you're saying. It's that the voice of fear keeps escalating and escalating and escalating, trying to get heard.
Right. And getting sort of agreement, right? It's escalating and escalating till you finally sort of go into agreement with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then once you do that, I just did this at the event that Barnet was at. We had a woman on stage, and she had like a level 9 fear, and just by slowing down and making friends with it, it moved to like a level 3.
Yeah, telling yourself the truth. It's beautiful. But it is an ongoing process. I really have to remember that for myself. There is no finish line.
Not at all. Unless you want to just have a resting lifetime.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I'll go to picking the potatoes.
I don't want to push out the boundary. By the way, that event that I went to was a fantastic event. And so for those of our listeners who are interested, we'll give you some more information later on, so where you can follow up and find out what Brian is up to and where he is working, what he is doing. But I can't more heartily recommend a program. So please check it out. But and also, unless you're doing a resting life, you do want to avail yourself of all the tools. And some tools are sharper than other tools, and this is a very sharp tool shed. I had a friend once who used to talk about resting lives and growing lives. You remember the show? Now, most of our listeners are not going to remember this. There used to be a show on called Bonanza.
Of course.
And of course, well, honey, you're my vintage.
I shouldn't have said that. So
I said, honey. That's not a casual disrespect for those of our listeners who don't know. Sandy and I have been married for going on 35 years. So
it wasn't just a sexist.
It wasn't totally a sexist remark. So. I actually heard somebody refer to a broadcaster on CNN yesterday. After a whole interview, he signed off and said, "Thank you, sweetheart."
Oh, my goodness.
And she said, "Really?" I'm not going to go there. But Bonanza, and he said, you have to think of life like you're the Cartwright, Pa Cartwright, and you have the Ponderosa. And you've got so many head of cattle and so many sons, and all of a sudden you need a little more room. So you go out, you have to clear all this pine, and you have to take acreage back from Nevada, and you're chopping, and then you're building barns and paddocks, and then you could rest for like 3-4 winters, and then you outgrow that again, and it's all hands on deck at the Ponderosa. And I think that's a gorgeous metaphor for life. I think that's probably what he was trying to communicate to me 15 years ago when I heard it.
Well, and I think that right now, of all times, we are entering what I call the age of transformation. I actually, cut my teeth as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley in the 90s, right at the birth of the internet, where the information age was born.
In no small way, by the way.
Thank you.
In no small way. I mean, I am aware of some of that backstory. I'm aware that you went out and did like $20 million raise, and in no small way. And then what happened is to you is what happens to many people. The blessing in your case is that it happened with an awareness, is that you were feeling unfulfilled, no meaningful, not that the work wasn't meaningful and the relationships weren't satisfying, and you took yourself with awareness out of the game, not pleasant, but you took yourself out of the game and banged the stick into neutral and allowed yourself to take the pause and reset, which brought you to your new work. And sometimes the transformational process requires tremendous boldness and tremendous courage of heart.
Sometimes?
Well, sometimes we get put into the spin cycle, and it's a light dry. and sometimes it's a very rough ride. The degree to which we are open to change when the suggestions from consciousness itself can be heard as a whisper rather than a shout is the degree to which you can mitigate how difficult it is.
So are we willing to create the crisis, or do we have to wait for the crisis for the change?
Exactly. Do you want to precipitate your change from the inside and pay attention, as Brian, as you're saying? You want to pay attention to the whispers from those of fear before they become shrieks.
So, Brian, you started to talk about the age of transformation, and I think we ended up in the Silicon Valley. So please continue.
Back to the Valley of Transformation.
So that we were, even just 20 years ago, we were in the information age. Mm-hmm. But if you've noticed, it quickly moved into the information overload age.
Yes.
Where there's now more information than we know what to do with.
Yeah.
And the pace of change just keeps getting faster and faster and faster. And I believe that the defining characteristic of our generation, of our time, of this century, is that the amount of change required in a given lifetime just for basic happiness. Mm-hmm. The level of reinvention, even if you don't want to do big purpose-driven work or follow your calling, just to get by and have a quote-unquote resting life in this lifetime, at this time, requires more change than you can do on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the potato farmer lifetime, you didn't need to change very much.
Right.
But the amount of change required, there's I forget the statistics, they're in my book, but there's these extraordinary statistics about how much change is happening right now and how fast. Mm-hmm. And that there's an estimate that something like 30 or 50% of all of the jobs that current preschoolers will have when they become adults don't exist yet.
Wow.
Right? That an average graduate of college right now is expected to have 18 jobs during their lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? We have to reinvent multiple careers, multiple selves,
mm-hmm. Yep.
just to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, and what we're seeing from our daughter and her generation is multiple jobs at the same time that are all often very diverse in themes.
Yeah.
But they're doing 2 and 3 different things that don't necessarily seem to me to relate, but are giving them fulfillment and growing and learning within those 3 different occupations.
So there is a skill set here. One of resilience. We are more and more, what I hear you speaking to, Brian, is that more and more with change comes uncertainty and comes chaos. Sometimes that chaos is wild and woolly. It's difficult, and sometimes it's beautiful. But with the ability to pay attention to one's fears and to the aspects of self, the various aspects of selves that have those fears, and to be in relationship with them to meet their needs, one develops this uncommon capacity to be resilient in that chaos and to come back and respond to whatever the challenges of life that life brings.
Yep. And the master skill in there is both acceptance of the fears, acceptance of the SSL no, and then asking for help. Over and over and over again. Okay, the bigger the spin cycle, the bigger the temptation is to try to hunker down and do it on our own.
Talk to me more about that help. Give me some examples of what you're talking about, because that if I was as I change and I'm in this chaotic kind of state that I woke up in today, I'm looking to myself to stabilize, but what's an example of help?
So in a typical month, I receive support from 4 to 8 coaches, counselors, and healers.
Mm-hmm.
I have an energy healer. Mm-hmm. I have multiple holistic doctors. I have high-level life coaches who are trained. We're looking for a new marriage and family therapist for Nicole and I.
Mm-hmm.
I have mentors. Barnet is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've rewired my habits so that when I get into overwhelm and my instinct is to hunker down, I've learned to take the act of courage, the leap of faith, to move out of my fear and ask for help.
I see. Yep. Using your resources as a strength rather than a crutch.
Right.
So one of the takeaways of the weekend that I experienced with Brian is that the the access to these resources, by their very nature, it's the access to these resources that is the new abundance, that is the recipe for success.
Beautiful.
We look for success. There is a relationship between the chaos that we experience in our lives and our desire to trail back to what we once understood in a simpler time, in a simpler age, when we had a more constrained awareness of how life works. We wanted it to be about insurances and guarantees that came out of, well, if I have a great job, or if I have this bank account, or I have this insurance policy, and that less and less is an antidote for the challenges, to deal with the challenges that life brings. More and more, we are aware that it is the access to the kinds of resources and tools that we're talking about that is the new wealth, that is the new prosperity, that provides meaning. And it also, I'm not suggesting that material good, I'm not in any way diminishing that. The material good is also a derivative of the new resources. It is wealth and prosperity are a function of access to resources, not the hoarding of the form of one of the forms that was a symbol for that once upon a time.
In the age of transformation, the riskiest thing you can do is try to play it safe.
Yep. What also?
Say that again, because that cannot be said enough.
In the age of transformation, the riskiest thing you can do is try to play it safe.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Right there. So, Brian, that's a book title.
It is.
We're going to have you on here again in 14 months with that book. That's a book title. That's fantastic.
What also comes to me is that what you're talking about, this age of transformation, there's a new influx of feminine energy that's necessary for this transformation. And part of feminine energy is the strength of vulnerability, where in the past the masculine has held, doing it all on our own.
You're not talking about gender.
No. I'm just talking about energies that we all have, women and men.
Will and action, as opposed to imagining and feeling.
Yeah, and the feminine energy in you and in me. And it's just an energy that is more comfortable with vulnerability and understands the strength of vulnerability. If you think of how women historically lived, they lived together communally, supporting each other. They understood that very, very, very at their core. I mean, if you think of the red tent, going back to biblical days, women gathered together for a week and supported themselves and nurtured each other and nurtured each other in many ways, emotionally, physically, and that was a very understandable idea.
This is so funny because I sometimes have 4 or 5 questions that are here just as a grab bag in the unlikely event that there is the dreaded radio silence.
That would never happen with Brian. That never
happens with Brian, but the unlikely event.
And it sort of never happens with you, Barnett, unfortunately.
So, we'll talk about that later. So I have these questions here, and one of the questions you just spoke to, that is, why do women together always seem to reach a higher truth?
Oh, isn't that interesting? So we're in some kind of synergy here.
I didn't even have to ask it now for you to start answering it. And Brian, actually, you have already dealt with 3 or 4 of these.
Well, and Stan, I think you bring up a really great point here. Was this transition to this new archetype of leadership is about integrating power and credibility with vulnerability.
Right.
And it's a totally different type of leadership to bring the masculine and feminine together rather than thinking I've got to just be
will and
stronger
action.
than anyone else without vulnerability.
Yes, I love that.
Well, this has been fantastic, and I can't believe that we blew through the entire segments. So we're going to have you back, Brian. And next time, hopefully we'll have you in studio. And hopefully you can bring your fantastic spouse.
And he can dance for us in the studio. We'll bring music.
He can. Nobody can Nobody, listeners, can dance like Brian and Nicole. So big hug to Nicole and to the girls. Before we let you go, I want you to share with our audience where they can learn more about what you're doing, where they can read your book, and what they need to know about Brian Whetten.
So for a general audience, anybody who's listening, please go to yesyeshellno.com. You can download the first 5 chapters of the book there, yesyeshellno.com. And then if you're a coach, counselor, healer, or transformational leader seeking to do this work in the world, and you love serving but hate selling and marketing your services, please go to sellingbygiving.com or the practicebuildingbreakthrough.com, practicebuildingbreakthrough.com. Those are the 2 links for that.
And I just want to say to our listeners that Barnett came back after spending a weekend with Brian and said he learned more about selling than he's learned anywhere else in his history. And he was inspired, and he discovered a way that he could sell that was authentic and comfortable for him. And he never really was sure that existed. So praises all around, folks. If you have an opportunity to spend time with Brian, it'll be well worth your time.
Absolutely. It's absolutely so. So, Brian, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for being in our lives every day. Mm-hmm. And we look forward to the next time we have you on air and the next time we just see you around the
campfire.
Around the campfire. Lots of love.
Lots of love. All my best.
Thank you.
Care.
Bye.
We will be right back. We're going to hear from our loving supporters and supporting sponsors, and we'll be right back with Sandi Stewart to wrap it up.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
We are back on Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett. I'm here with Sandi Stewart. And that was really a pleasure to spend that time with Brian. I always enjoy the time that I spend with Brian. And if I can add to it by spending time with Brian on air, how fabulous. Everybody else gets to enjoy him as well. He's really a special man. He's an interesting man
and a heartfelt man. Very heartfelt.
A very heartfelt man. Mm-hmm. And as you pointed out a couple of times, a hell of a dancer.
Woo, yeah. And I really do love that idea of selling by giving, focusing on what you give rather than what you're getting. I think that's a very powerful message, as he said, for our time, where we're moving into. We've seen what getting has done to the world.
Yes.
Focusing on getting.
What's in it for me?
Yeah. We see what that's done. And we kind of need a new paradigm. We can't do the old way in a new fangled form that is actually the same form. We actually need a new function, and the giving is a new function that can, out of that, can create a new form.
I'm happy to share with you and with our listeners my personal takeaway from the weekend that I spent as Brian's student. And I realized that my anxiety and my issues around selling, not so much selling myself as a filmmaker or selling, but in one-on-one work that I do with people too, I've always felt that uncomfortable around that. Or sometimes people would
even
call
pitching a movie, right?
Pitching a movie, not so much. No, It's not so much the same kind of issue. It may be, but I can only take one little chunk at a time. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about, somebody will say, I'd love to work with you, and, what do you charge? Mm-hmm. That always spins me, because it makes the work about me.
Mm-hmm. What's your value?
What's my value?
Yeah.
I'm now improving myself, and suddenly I'm threading back to being a young man. well, this is how effective I am, and here's my credentials, and so these things.
I love you for what you do, not who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so on point. I love you for what you do, not who you are. Yeah. So I'm not asking to be loved. If I'm going to work with somebody, or if I'm going to offer my service to somebody, I'm not asking to be loved, but I have been operating in that mindset because I haven't been aware of any other one. The alternative that I discovered, that I received from Brian, is to come at it with an eye on the client, on the other, or on the person, the prospective client, or the person that I'm speaking to. So rather than, what do you charge, it's well, let's just put the clutch in on this. Let's slow down for a second. What are your needs? So that it starts to become about the values of the other person and how best I can meet them. And in a very patient and a very curious conversation, I can begin to learn about the life of the other person, what their aspirations are, what their issues are, what their problems are. Sometimes I'm even able to see below the surface of what they think they want, what they're asking for, as opposed to, very often it's what they're asking for is different from what they want.
Right.
Lots of people in my business, or in the film business side of my business, lots of people say, they want to be in the film business, or they want to be an actor, or they want to be a writer, and you dig a little deeper, and they have other agendas. Really, they want celebrity, or they want a lifestyle that they imagine to be glamorous, or they want money, or they have other agendas. So you slow it down and look to what the other person is really wanting, and attune to it.
Meet them where that place is.
Meet them where they are, and then see how I can be supportive, how one can be supportive of them fulfilling those needs, one piece at a time. And then it becomes, so what would that be worth to you to do that? I have my sense of my own value. But now it becomes a dance between, well, what is that worth to you? And if somebody becomes aware of what their real dreams are and what they really value, and you help them tease it out, then they have a very different, they're coming from a different place about what kind of energy and commitment and time and investment, financial as well, they are willing to make in the support of their dreams. That's very different than what's your rate.
It's beautiful.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's doable. You can do that with presence and awareness.
And not everybody is a fit.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes I'm aware. I've been aware in the past, and you're already into something, and you're aware this isn't really a fit.
This is somebody who doesn't get my metaphors.
So if you don't get my metaphors, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. But also, if somebody is not willing to make a wholehearted commitment, and if they think I'm going to do their work, that's not going to work either. But you have to really be willing to transform. It's not about breaking rock, but it is about breaking something that is sometimes even more obstinate, which are old habits and conditioned assumptions about how the world works.
Right. And there may be another therapist who's more suited for that person because they have the patience to be with them where they are and nurture whatever is coming at that moment, whether it's wholehearted or not.
Yeah. That's right. That's so.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this question. You began to talk earlier about the feminine energies and women, and I pointed out that I had this card here that said, "Why do women together always reach a higher truth?" And underneath it, the next question says, "Well, what makes a woman womanly?" And I'm curious how you would respond to that.
Oh, that's a really hard question. It's a really hard question for me. And
do you think I'm going to lob you a softball?
It's an emotional question. I feel a lot of emotion coming up when you ask me that question because I grew up in the age of femininity when we burned our bras. And it was very important for us to have a voice, but unfortunately, the only role models we had that had voices were men. So I put on my pantsuit and my tie-up shoes and went out in the world to prove that I was just like men. And many, many years later, a young daughter that I raised, without television, so she wouldn't be influenced by all those fake forms of womanhood, on her own started wearing little short tops and strutting her stuff like Britney Spears. And I felt like all that I had done was for naught. So this is another conversation, but I think that I went overboard one way, our daughter's generation went overboard another way in response to us denying our femininity. They said, hell no, we're women. And now we're all meeting in the middle, and there's a new idea of what a woman is emerging. And I'd love to talk about that another time.
Well, let's make a commitment to talk about that next week.
Okay.
We will do that. So in the meantime, we've run out of time. I want to thank Insight Events USA and Hierophant Publishing, without whom this program would not be possible. They are makers of fine events and books for the body, mind, and spirit community. We love them. I hope you will too. And thank you for listening. And please, if you enjoyed this, tell other people. We love having you. And until next time, thank you.